There's a lot of quick wins that you can do to overcome some of those barriers, and I know that that's what people here wish to do, which is kind of why you're here. But I thought before we go on to the solutions, I wanted to introduce you to kind of a human face. And obviously every disabled candidate is different, faces different barriers, needs different adjustments. But I just thought hearing somebody's personal story would bring this to life rather than me just giving you statistics. So I'm going to pass over now to Will, who is one of our candidates. You're not supposed to have favourite candidates, but if I did have a favourite candidate, Will would be the one. And so he's going to talk to you about his experience. You don't have to speak, you can have a sit down.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Oh, there was...
sorry, I did just move it. Yeah.
Right. I put that slide up because I think it's hopefully a slightly humorous way of trying to explain to you, as simply as I can, the barriers that I face and the challenges that I've experienced. In 2003, I got sacked from my last full-time paid job. I'd rather not go into the details as to why that is, but the long and short of it is that it's created a lot of problems for me. Quite simply, I have never found a way to actually get around that barrier because at some level I'm obliged to reveal the details of it, and doing so in practical terms is almost setting me up to fail. What I want to try and get across to you is the notion that the entire recruitment process for someone who is on the autistic spectrum, like myself, requires a degree of competency in performing tasks that, even in the best of circumstances, I am especially bad at. And when there is so much at stake, and you increase the stress levels, if you were inclined to bet on these odds, you would be almost guaranteed to have your horse romp home. I should say I haven't written any kind of script or given you any presentation other than that slide because I thought it made me laugh when I saw it. The reason for doing that is that I wanted at some level to try and make what I'm saying to you this morning authentic. And I thought, if I produce something and spend a lot of time editing it, honing it, refining it, well, yeah, okay, it could get the point across, but it just wouldn't have the same degree of impact. So, what are the problems then? Well, I'm 47. I have 3 degrees. And I have two are undergraduate degrees, a master's degree, and I've qualified for the bar. I set about trying to retrain because what I actually decided I wanted to do was to help people by becoming a barrister. What I hadn't appreciated was, to use a rather crude analogy, the extent to which it's necessary as a barrister to have the equivalent of a good bedside manner on the part of a doctor. I sometimes feel that I'm an alien existing on the wrong planet because as an autistic person, I struggle to understand how to effectively interact with other people, and I struggle to understand what it is they want. So in the context of a job interview, what are we talking about as problems? Well, something really simple. It might sound, I suspect what I'm about to say to you won't be it won't strike you as obvious, but it's dressing properly, or at least as expected. Now, this morning I'm going to jacket, try, and hopefully I look relatively, what's the word, appropriate. I'm not comfortable wearing these clothes. I hate them. I have major sensory issues. If I could attend a job interview, ideally wearing my preferred dress, it would be jeans and a t-shirt. That's how I dress most of the time. When was the last time, if you were trying to apply for even a middle-ranking role, unless perhaps it was something like IT, or certainly a role that wasn't customer-facing, where you could turn up in jeans and a t-shirt? I have trouble looking at people in the eye for the appropriate amount of time. I mean, I know this is a bit of a cliche, but eye contact is a really, really serious issue for me. Now, I'm going to advance what I think is probably a quite controversial thesis, but conventional recruitment, I venture to suggest, is not actually about, and it took me a long time to work this out, it's not actually about determining whether the candidate is the right person for the job. Simply put, no sane person applies for a role she can't do. What it's really about is convincing the employer that you are, for want of a better form of words, a decent, nice person, that you can get along with them. But if you have enormous difficulty with small talk, shaking hands, with the right degree of grip, feigning enthusiasm when you're nervous as hell, and facing a degree of terror, all the sensory difficulty. I mean, it's a struggle for me today because this fluorescent lighting is really problematic for me. Okay? Facing the job interview, I'm in a situation which can induce something equivalent to a migraine. And I don't have the luxury of saying, okay, would you mind conducting the interview in a room where there's a lot of natural light, there's no external noises, I'm not likely to be interrupted by colleagues walking in at any moment. Smiling even. Why would I want to smile when I'm terrified? So, you get these series of questions put to you in the context of not just the interview itself, although that's a huge barrier. It's actually in the context of job adverts. As someone who's very literally minded and who doesn't have the degree of insight into what it is the employer is actually wanting, most job adverts are incredibly badly worded. And it's not a question of not knowing what to say. That's to say, how to fill out a job application form, if that's the standard recruitment process. It's more a question of, how do I say it? How do I say it in a way that presents me in the best possible light? How do I explain that, insofar as I've had a career at all, it's happened because, well, let's take my very first job after graduating university when I was 21. I managed to talk my way into a very lowly programming job with a company that's now defunct, but they were one of the UK's first internet service providers, Demon Internet. I basically completely sidestepped the HR department. I went straight to their senior programmer and said, you need an intranet. I know how to build intranets. In fact, I've built a prototype for you, which I did. Have a look at it. Tell me what you think. Because I think you need one of these, and here's the evidence that I can actually do it. And here's the evidence that I'm an asset. I could potentially be an asset for you. 48 hours later, the guy rings you up and said, when can you start? That's how I got the job. I would never have got a foot in the door had I gone to HR and said, well, I'm a graduate, I don't have any actual work experience, I don't like working with other people, I want to basically be left alone, I'm a bit of a nerd, I like writing computer code, you know. It just wasn't going to happen. Now, that was what got me the foot on the ladder to have some semblance, and I say that with caution, of a career in IT, which fell completely flat. The role that I ultimately, as I say, got sacked from, I used to work for Nokia as a software engineer. They wanted me. I didn't have to sell myself. And that I say that to illustrate the point that, you know, if they actually had a job and they were recruiting for it, I wouldn't have known how to do it. They wanted me to go all the way over to Finland for a job interview. I said, no, I'm not getting on a plane to sit in front of a panel of senior HR people who, with the best will in the world, have no technical knowledge and have no insight, and probably they can't answer the questions that I need to know the answer to. You want me to be maintaining your IT services, your servers, and all this technical stuff. I want to talk to the techies. Can we do it here in London, since they're based here? And since they wanted me, they did. But again, I wouldn't have got that position. I'm conscious of rambling, and I'm also conscious of my time. So I'm going to try and wrap this up by saying, if people like myself who are on the autistic spectrum are wanted by employers out there, they have to radically rethink their entire recruitment process. And when I say radically, I mean just tear it up and start from a completely different way of doing it. Basically, go to them and say, we want you, show us what you can do, and then decide. Look, I'll finish with this point. If you owned a restaurant, for example, and you wanted a bunch of chefs, why would you invite them in for a face-to-face interview and get them to talk about their passion for cooking? I think that's a completely daft way of doing it. What I would do is I would go out and buy a load of raw ingredients, point them in the kitchen and say, you've got an hour, prepare a meal for me, show me what you can do. That's the kind of, you need to do the equivalent with people on the autistic spectrum. Anyway, thank you.